Um, Today I kind of just want to speak about how I think nowadays a lot of us struggle to think now. And what I mean by that is like I think that a lot of us get caught up in what is going to happen in the future. You know, a lot of us get caught up in like how that's going to affect us, how we're going to deal with the future. You know, and a lot of us get stressed about that kind of stuff. And I think that it really starts to take a toll and cloud on your judgment of the present. You know, when you're writing an exam, you know, you're looking down at your paper, you're not looking forward. Because you can't make progress if you're looking forward and not looking at what's down in front of you. It's kind of like tackling the problem. You kind of have to do it in the now, not in the future. Um, I think that we just worry too much of sort of what is to come rather than what is now. Because you have to face the fact that in order to get, for example, in order to get to that place that you are worrying, you have to take those steps now. And focusing on that is sort of what will give you peace of mind rather than focusing on that problem to come. And another thing is you just don't know if that problem is ever going to come. You are so uncertain of the future and you'll never know what is to happen. So I think that worrying about it is sort of, you're worrying about something that isn't guaranteed. Which, you know, when you think of it, it that in itself kind of helps you solve that problem. You know, you're thinking about something and you're worrying about something that is completely out of control. Your future can be determined by you, but there is nothing that stops your future taking a turn that you didn't expect. You know, you never know what there is to come, you never know what there is to happen, so you're just worrying about something that isn't certain. I mean, if you are in university and you're studying medicine and you're so worried about getting your degree and actually becoming a doctor, you're worrying about something that isn't sure to happen. You know, you're worrying something that might not even be your fate. And I think that a lot of us sort of just need to start like sitting back and realizing that like fate will take you sort of where you need to go. Going back onto my point about the doctor, you know, if you're so worried about getting your degree, am I going to be a doctor? Am I going to be this? Am I going to be successful? I think that you're not helping yourself by worrying about that. I think that you should just continue on the now, which is, you know, you continue your studies, you continue to work hard, and that's sort of the now that you need to be focusing on, because who knows, maybe in a week, in a month, in a day, you're going to realize that, oh, wow, I didn't actually want to be a doctor, you know, or something is going to happen which is going to permit you from being a doctor. But all of that has a reason. All of it has a purpose, and you have to realize that. And living in the now is a great way to sort of realize that a lot of things have had purpose. You know, if okay, you know, I'm not becoming a doctor now, I want to be an engineer. And you become an engineer and you're much more successful in that and you're much more happy in that, then that is clearly your purpose. And you can only realize that by living in the now, by living in the present, who you are today, in this moment where you are sitting, standing, floating, laying down, who you are in that moment. And that kind of, to me, is the way to achieve a certain peace within your mind that will help you realize why the things that have happened are happening, you know, and give you reasoning behind it. A lot of us get trapped in that future, you know, I don't want to grow old, I don't want to this. But the thing is, that is inevitable. The future is inevitable. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. So why worry about it? You know, it's like you're standing in a field and there's an object moving at you at full speed. There's an object moving at you and it's going to hit you. Instead of, you know, moving out of the way, and you're just kind of worrying about what's going to happen when it hits you. You're worrying about the speed that it's moving at, and And that's a good way to look at sort of the problem that you're causing yourself, is that you're just worrying about something that is inevitably going to happen, you know, instead of focusing in the now. Another thing is that a lot of us get stuck in the past. You know, living in the now doesn't mean that you just don't live in the future. It means that you cannot live in the past. And a lot of us do this in terms of you sort of reminisce on the mistakes that you've made, on things that you've done in the past, and you get trapped in that. You know, I wish I never did this. You know, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said this to this person. I should have taken that job opportunity. I should have asked that person out. You know, and that is another way that you escape living in the now, which isn't a good thing. You know, it clouds your judgment of the present, of what's going on right now, because you're so sort of focused on what could have happened, the mistakes that you've made in the past, you know? Like, oh, what would have happened if we stayed together? What would have happened if I just left earlier? What would have happened if I said yes to that person? Thinking about those things sort of constantly doesn't solve an issue. You're sort of only worshipping the problem. The past is something that has happened, and there is something that we cannot change. Just like the future, we cannot change it. We can sort of do things to progress towards a future that we would like for ourselves, you know? If you would like to make a lot of money in the future, there are definitely ways that, you know, you can atone yourself to be able to achieve that type of future, but there is nothing stopping something happening. Like, I don't know, that you never know. It could be something like you get hit by a truck and then you are paralyzed, and then you just don't really make that much money from there, or you realize that money is not the thing that makes you happy. It's the same with the past. But the past, there is just nothing at all we can do to change it. You know, you can, if you in the past had bullied someone and you go now and apologize to them, you are sort of fixing what happened. Not fixing what happened, you're sort of taking accountability for the things that happened in the past, but you're not solving anything. You know, whatever happened had happened. However you made them feel in that moment, they felt in that moment, and that'll be like that for the rest of their lives. You know, you made a mistake about something, you failed an exam, you know, you lost someone very close to you. It will always be like that. If you gain them back, you know, if you redo well on your exam, it never will cover up the fact that you did bad on that exam, or you did lose that person, you did make them feel that way in the end. You did make yourself feel that way in the end. Which doesn't have to be seen as such a bad thing. Doesn't have to be seen as something that's so like, it doesn't have to be like something that sucks that bad, you know, because when you're looking at the future, the way you should be looking at it is not that it happened and it's the end of the world. It's that those mistakes are ways for you to grow and to learn. Without the past, you would have never been the person that you are now. Without that mistake that you made that you really regret, you would never be the person that you are now. And that is the truth of it. And that is exactly why those things happen. And then taking sort of that perspective and putting it into the future, you know that whatever is going to happen now is going to sort of affect what happens in the future, you know? You can water the plant of your future. You can grow it. But there's no certain way to know. If I plant a seed and I water it and I give it nutrition, I know that it's going to grow. But there is no certainty of how I want it to look. There's no way for me to accurately predict how that plant is going to look. You know, I can't predict the amount of leaves it's going to have, the amount of stems it's going to have, the amount of roots it's going to have, how tall it's going to be. There's no way for me to predict that, but all I know is that if I feed it and if I treat it well, it is going to grow. And a lot of us get stuck in sort of these two sides, you know, this future and the past. And the thing is, with the past, a lot of us, when we get stuck in it, it's like driving a car while you're only looking in the rearview mirror. You know, it's just not possible. You cannot move forward if you're looking backwards. And it's not an easy thing to sort of let go of what happened in the past, but it's something that it's needed, you know. It's a gradual thing that can happen. It's sort of just going back on things and realizing why they happened, and sort of you can kind of see the positive effect everything has. Sort of adopting an optimistic mindset on the past is, for me, has been a great way to sort of let go of a lot of things. I mean, I think if you have an optimistic um, view on things, then a lot of the things in the past won't trouble you as much. For example, I mean, if you broke up with someone, right? Having an optimistic mindset means that you're able to sort of just be grateful of the things that you may have had with that person together, and you're sort of able to learn from the mistakes you made, and you can sort of realize like that you learn things from being with them. You know, it's an experience that you got to have. Even though it ended, you got to have that experience. And if you were to go back to your past self and say, it's either you have this and it goes away, or you never have this, you're going to choose having it but losing it, because at least you get to have it, you know. And maybe without that breakup or losing that job, you would have never gotten what is now. And if you're not satisfied with what you have now, you know, you still have regrets. There's still that optimistic mindset. There's always positive to take out of it. I mean, you are still alive and breathing, which is something that you have to kind of see as a positive thing. It's an advantage. It's a blessing. And I feel like a lot of us, when we get trapped in the past or the future, we start to lose gratitude for what we have now, because you're sort of stuck in this other plane of time that doesn't really exist anymore, or doesn't exist at the moment. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future doesn't exist now. It will exist, but it doesn't exist now. And getting trapped in sort of those planes, we start to forget what's around us. You know, if you're in a field of roses and you're looking straight ahead up, you know, at the trees, at the clouds, or you're either looking backwards at the lake and the waterfall, there are things that you can appreciate, you know, and maybe you might be like, I want to go back to that waterfall, I want to go back to that lake, or will I ever get to those mountains? Will I ever get to that sky? Will I ever get to those trees? But what you sort of forget is that you are in a field of roses, you know, and the beauty of the roses around you, and a lot of us will start to take life for granted. You know, you start to sort of not realize what you have around you. You know, you can start to sort of neglect friendships that you have, relationships that you have. You can start to neglect just simple things that are in your possession now, just because you're so worried about what you used to have or what you will have. And that, unfortunately, just kind of only continues the cycle of living in another timeline. Because once you sort of really think about what you used to have and what you will have, like I said, you forget about what you have now. And then when you're in the future, you might look back at it and realize the things that you had, and regret that you weren't so grateful for them. You might regret that you didn't acknowledge them as much as you should have in that moment, because of how much those things meant to you. You know, whether that be you're so focused on a relationship that you used to have 4 years ago. And I know I keep on using relationship as an example, but I feel like it's quite relatable to a lot of people, because it's a big point of struggle. Love is a very strong emotion, and you know, it brings you to your highest highs and your lowest lows. And I feel like it's just a huge part of people kind of struggling with certain different things, is love itself. So that's kind of why I keep on using it as an example. But I mean, you can kind of like adjust it to whatever you mean. When I speak about relationship, I can be speaking about a friendship, a job. I can be speaking about a class. You can kind of adapt that information. It doesn't specifically only relate to a relationship or a lover or a friend or a job or a class, whatever, that kind of stuff. I think that like if you are so focused on a relationship that you lost a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, you might forget about what's in your possession. If you're focused on, I lost them, but in the future I'm going to get them back, that's two different timelines that you're not supposed to be in, because those are out of your control. You should be in the present, because you might sort of start to neglect yourself, thinking so much about what is going to happen in the future, or thinking so much about what's going to happen in the past, you forget to actually appreciate maybe those things that did happen and the outcome that it had. And I know there's some things that you just kind of don't want to appreciate, like, it could be trauma or a really bad experience that you kind of don't want to appreciate. But what you can, there is always something to appreciate, and I think that appreciating it could be like, you're out of it now. It's not something that's happening anymore. Or it could be at the fact that, like, it helped you learn something. But a lot of us don't realize that. A lot of us don't kind of see what it might have helped us learn. I mean, if you were walking and you got hit by a car, I apologize for the video cutting off. My phone overheated. But there is something, like, just a good example, there is something for me to take away from that. I mean, I guess I got to go downstairs and watch my brother freestyle for a while until my phone was okay again. But going back to my main point of sort of taking away from what has happened in the past, I was mentioning about you on the road, you get hit by a car, you get hit by a truck, and then something bad sort of happens from that. And there's a takeaway from it, you learn to maybe be more careful on the road, you be more cautious about those kinds of things. And it sort of just shows the beauty of the past, instead of sort of living in it in regret or in angst, we can sort of learn from it and take away beauty from different things, which is going back on my adopting an optimistic mindset. There's so much that you can sort of learn from the past instead of sort of living in it, trapping yourself in that constant state of reminiscence or nostalgia and that sort of sadness from the past. Unfortunately, we get very comfortable in that, and then we start to deteriorate sort of our self-value, and sort of we start to deteriorate our value of what is now and what we have now, what is in front of us, sort of, what is around us, the people that we have, the experiences that we get to experience. I feel like we live too personally, and we should start living more intimately. And I mean that in the sense that we should sort of start giving affection and sort of have more compassion for the things that we experience and the problems that we have and the things that we like to do and the people that are around us, rather than taking it personally and trying to relate it to everything. And I mean that in the sense that we try to fit everything into a small box instead of sort of just having a level of appreciation for different things. And that sort of, I think, comes from fear, which is, I guess, can be really harbored when you're in that state of living in the past or living in the future. You sort of start to harbor fear of, what if what I did back then is going to catch up to me? Or what if something really bad is going to happen in the future? And those things catch up to you, in terms of fear. And it takes away from our problem-solving skills and our ability to be able to solve things. So, living in the past and living in the future really does just, at the end of the day, it will just take a toll on your vision of everything that is happening around you and everything that is happening right now. Peace of mind, you want to be grateful for things, and you want to live now. You want to live as who you are now, instead of living as who you're going to be or as who you were, because those are people that you are not. So why are you trying to live as them? You know, my one of my favorite sort of things that I have said in this, not to sound arrogant or anything, I'm not trying to say like, oh, look at me, I'm such a philosopher, but is that if you cannot control it, why are you worrying about it? And it's just something to really, really think about. Something that has helped me a lot. I do reflect on that a lot. There are things that have happened in the past and things that I will have worried about in the future where I have just sat down and just told myself, like, I cannot control these things anymore. Or right now I cannot control these things. Why am I worrying about it? It's not going to solve anything. It's not going to help my case in any kind of way. And that's just kind of a key take back I have from this discussion. That's all I really have to say about living in the past and the future, about living in the now and the importance of it. If you watched to the end, thank you very much. And if you didn't, thank you again. I hope that you were able to take something away from this, or that you were able to relate to it, or that my words spoke to you in some kind of way. Yeah, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.